Welcome back. A new study shows that 1 in 6 American children are considered obese. That's 16% of all kids. And the pandemic has had a major impact on this growing problem. Newsy health and science reporter Lindsay Thies has more about it.
A new report combining several obesity studies over the past year says 1 in 6 American children are obese. Even more bleak, rates for American Indian, Alaskan Native, Black, and Hispanic children. Children from lower income homes fare far worse than higher ones.
The bottom line here is that obesity rates have been and are far too high in America, and kids of color and those children that live furthest from economic opportunity continue to be at greatest risk.
Meanwhile, the FDA issued new salt recommendations Wednesday, suggesting restaurants and processed food makers lower their sodium content by 3,000 milligrams. That's a little bit more than a teaspoon a day. Americans consume an average of 3,400 milligrams of sodium daily. Too much salt can cause high blood pressure, heart disease, and stroke. Alexis Olivia knows the pandemic's impact on obesity firsthand.
At one point, it was getting kind of hard since I couldn't see any more friends and it was kind of like isolating. It was kind of a hard point in my life.
She went to the doctor and had to change her diet and exercise. Experts say for people like Alexis, diet and exercise are only part of the problem.
Our nation's policies are failing our children. And systemic factors like inadequate access to healthy food, stagnant incomes, lack of health insurance, and access to health care all contribute to childhood obesity.
Experts say the federal government's addressed some of those factors temporarily during COVID by offering universal school meals and the expanded child tax credit, but say it's only a Band-Aid if those go away. Lindsay Thies, Newsy, San Francisco.
Let's go in depth now on this issue of childhood obesity. I want to bring in cardiologist Dr. Fahmi Farah to help me do that. Doctor, hello, thanks for coming on.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
First up, how alarming are these numbers to you?
They're actually quite alarming. Childhood obesity has been an issue in our country for quite some time, but during the pandemic, the numbers have significantly worsened at an alarming rate over the course of just 1 year. To give you a perspective, we have 19% of our children in the nation, they fall under obesity category, 19%. That was last year. Over the course of the last 1 year during this pandemic, that number went all the way up to 22%. That's a really big increase in just 1 year span. Also, the rate at which the average pound, the number in pounds, is 6 pounds weight gain on average per year per child. That number has doubled over the course of the last 1 year. It is now 12-pound gain within a 1 year period. So that's quite alarming.
Yeah, and we know that a lot of this is happening to kids in lower incomes. They don't have access to healthy food. We know we have a drive-through fast food culture. But for children with these problems of weight, what kind of issues could that set them up for?
Childhood obesity is a really big problem because it really sets the tone and stage for how they will be for the rest of their lives. There's something called adipose tissue, which is fat tissue. We are born with a finite number of those that tissue, the cells. However, during the early childhood period, we can still increase the number of adipose tissue cells. And so during childhood, if we have obesity, then obesity becomes an issue for the rest of our lives. And it really sets the stage for risk factors for heart disease like high blood pressure, high cholesterol, diabetes, and ultimately heart disease like blockages, heart attack, heart failure. These are very serious conditions, and strokes.
Yeah, because I was going to say a poor diet can affect heart health at some point in these kids' lives.
Absolutely, and we are seeing heart disease in younger and younger folks. We're seeing people in their late 20s who are needing procedures like cardiac catheterization, angiogram is the other name for it, stents, because we're finding blockages in these kids who have severe obesity and have risk factors like diabetes and high cholesterol and hypertension. So food is the key, and during the pandemic, we know that healthy food became less available to many children across the nation, and the numbers that are worse in the low socioeconomic communities, particularly among African American and Hispanic children, is where we're seeing the disparity the most. So all of these are very alarming.
Right, and with the high cost of healthcare as well, parents, families are already struggling right now, and that will even add more problems for them. I want to talk to you about another aspect, and that is the amount of salt in our diets. This was alarming. U.S. regulators want sodium levels in condiments, cereals, French fries, potato chips to be reduced. Also, majority of the sodium comes from packaged and restaurant food. Over the next 2.5 years, the FDA's target sodium levels aim to cut an average intake by 12%, from 3,400 to 3,000 milligrams a day, but that would still leave average intake above the recommended limit of 2,300 milligrams a day for people 14 and older. What do you say about that? How dangerous is this amount of sodium in our diets?
I think cutting back on sodium and making a policy like this where people will have to abide by some guidelines for restaurants and food packaging companies is a great idea. Especially as a cardiologist, I do think that sodium in our food needs to be cut back, because sodium is a problem for risk factors like hypertension. We can get high blood pressure, which is one of the #1 risk factors for heart disease and stroke. So cutting back sodium is a very good idea, and it's going to be a key factor for making Americans healthier.
Very good advice. We appreciate your insights so much. Dr. Fahmi Farah, thank you for being with us.
Thank you so much for having me.